Hello everyone, and thank you for being here. My name's Yatharth, and today I will be walking you through a level design portfolio breakdown, specifically focusing on my Far Cry 5 level. This project overview highlights a custom story mission set in the world of Far Cry 5, which I built entirely in Far Cry 5 level editor. The narrative takes place right after the player character is abducted by cultists. They manage to escape their grasp and are about to meet their associates. Throughout my game design major, I focused heavily on building mechanics in Unity and Unreal Engine. For this piece, my main goal was to get out of my technological comfort zone of using game engines such as Unity and Unreal and use a custom engine level editor that I am completely unfamiliar with to make a functioning level out of it. I established a few specific goals for this project. First, I wanted to teach myself how to model a level layout directly onto a sculpted terrain and how to use pre-made assets to create a final look of the level. Beyond teaching myself a completely new engine interface and applying my level designs in it, I needed to ensure that level supports both playstyles, specifically stealth and gunfights. Finally, I aimed to weave narrative and environmental elements into this level design. To simulate professional development conditions, I incorporated strict deadline to finish this project on time. I also had to finish the level design within a memory budget allotted by the game's editor. Diving into the level design itself, the mission objective is to kill the cult leader that has taken over the town. The entire encounter has a duration of around 10 to 20 minutes. The gameplay focuses heavily on gunplay from first person camera perspective. Combat features takedowns, grenades, and guns. My personal goal here was to make portfolio piece in a completely new editor and find ways to implement the designs I come up with. Now let's look at the narrative design. The player character is supposed to meet with the group of associates at a remote log cabin after they discover the location of a group of cultists that they have been tracking. These cultists have been terrorizing nearby towns, forcing residents out of their homes and killing anyone who stands against them. The player character plans to drive the cultists out of the town and convince its residents to join their revolution. To do so, they arrange to meet at the cabin, regroup, and approach the townspeople together. However, on the way to the meeting, the player character is ambushed and abducted by the cultists, losing all of their inventory in the process. With no weapons or equipment, the player makes their way back to the cabin, arriving several hours after the planned meeting. Upon reaching the cabin, they discover the cultists have already arrived and their associates have been killed. The cabin has been left in disarray, and on a nearby desk, the player finds a set of papers containing a message from the cultists, challenging the players to come and find them. This completely shifts the mission from a planned operation to a personal pursuit to track down those responsible and uncover what they planned next. This flowchart outlines the mission's beats and objectives flow across 3 acts. Act 1 involves arriving at the cabin and collecting information. Act 2 requires player to arrive at the water tower and scout the town for cultists. Finally, Act 3 kicks off by launching the attack on the first wave to draw out the cult leader, culminating in the final objective to kill the cultist leader. Here we have a graph indicating the intensity of the mission as it goes. I wanted the pacing to be exponential. As seen here, once the player character has acquired the weapons and the loadouts, they can instantly drop back into the action after a less intense part of the mission. These are the core gameplay mechanics. Traversal includes movements, ladder climbing, ledge climbing, zipline, gliding, and driving. For combat, player can utilize gunplay, turrets, the mortars, takedowns, throwing items, and grenades. To support those combat loops, the level also features consumables including health kits, armors, and herbs. the player will face varied resistance, specifically assaulter class, sniper class, armored cultists, and hammer cultists. Additionally, enemies have access to defensive gears, including mortar, turrets, and alarm towers that will be used to bring in the reinforcements. Here is a top-down view of the layout, which I break down over in the next few slides. This slide highlights the golden path through the layout, showing primary intended route for the player. Here you can see the layout boundary. I focused heavily on establishing clear boundary mechanics to ensure the player remains contained within the playable area without breaking the immersion. This is the enemy defense zones. This map details the enemy defense zones. It highlights the zones primarily defended by cultists as well as the locations of the alarm that they can use to call in the reinforcements. Breaking down the layout by acts. In the first act, we see the player start location and the player's hike to the log cabin. The log cabin is where the player finds their dead associates and an open challenge from the cultists. Second act. Here, the player drives an ATV along the marked path, and the player then climbs the cliff to get to the water tower. Once up there, player climbs up to the water tower to scout the town before attacking. And finally, in the third act, after scouting the town, the player walks down the hill and begins the attack on the first wave of enemies. And these final slides provide an additional visual perspective of the completed environment. And I would like to thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions about the development process. And now we'll be moving into talking about the gameplay part of the level.
Outpost.
Hello, and welcome to my gameplay show for my custom Far Cry 5 mission. I created this level using the Outpost game mode preset. Throughout this video, I will walk you through my design choices, the reasoning behind them, and how I shaped the overall experience of the level. As we move through the level, we can see a path naturally carved into the landscape. To reinforce the intended direction, I've placed the wooden beams along the ground as environmental guides, subtly communicating to the players where they should go next. Now, as we approach the doorstep of the cabin, we see some silhouettes, and I placed a custom ray to highlight it even further. From an environmental storytelling perspective, this gives the player a subtle indication that something is wrong before they even step inside, building curiosity and tension throughout the environment itself. Once we are inside the cabin, we are presented with the bodies of our fallen associates. I used the positioning of this particular body as an environmental cue to subtly direct the player towards the objective. While an objective marker already provides an explicit guidance, I wanted to reinforce that direction through environmental composition. That the character poses suggest that they were reaching towards something, creating a natural point of interest and encouraging the player to follow that visual cue. Once our next objective is assigned, we are now ready to move to our next location. We get on the ATV to cover the next part of the road. Now let me pause here for a second, as I would like to talk about two things in the frame. From here, I wanted to bring the water tower into the focus of the player as our next point of destination. I have purposely highlighted it so that the players can see that from a distance and know that they have to make their way to it. Secondly, in order to create the world that we are in more immersive, I decided to add wildlife in the level, such as this deer here. Continuing. Here, I'm using another piece of environmental storytelling. The body hanging from the water tower acts as a strong visual focal point within the settlement, immediately drawing players' attention. Its placement also communicates something about the enemies we're going to encounter. They display their kills as trophies. This establishes their brutality and gives the player understanding of the threat through the environment before they even encounter them directly. Another quick little detail that I want to bring attention to is this rattlesnake here. I placed it as an subtle environmental cue to communicate to the player that they should slow down, stay quiet, and approach the situation steadily, rather than explicitly telling the player to use stealth, which with like dialogues or voice lines. The snake acts as a diegetic hint that encourages player to think about how they approach the encounter. However, during playtesting, I noticed many players ignored this cue and continued playing their own way. This showed me that while the environmental hint was noticeable, it wasn't necessarily strong enough to communicate the intended behavior to every player. So now as we climb the water tower, we get our first clear view of the town we're about to enter. I designed this vantage point intentionally to give players an opportunity to scout the settlement and identify potential points of interest before committing to an approach. From here, player can gather information about the layout of the town, locate cultists, and begin planning on how they want to approach the encounter. The water tower therefore serves not only as a landmark but also as a strategic observation point that supports player agency and preparation. Also, I made sure that the alarms remain unobstructed by the surrounding tree lines and buildings, allowing players to easily spot them from a distance. This gives them strong visual readability and helps player identify an important gameplay element while scouting the settlement. Since we established earlier that the player character had lost their weapons, this is where I give them back to the player. This creates a small narrative payoff while also preparing the player for the encounter ahead. Again, we see wildlife naturally making its way into the level. Here, the rabbit acts as a small ambient detail that helps make the environment feel more alive and immersive. These subtle moments aren't directly tied to the gameplay, but they help sell the idea that the world exists beyond players' immediate objectives. As we continue through the encounter, we see the player fighting through the different enemies and gunning them down. But I wanted this encounter to be fun and exciting, and big explosions in video games are fun and exciting to me. From the machine gun turret, one of the most prominent things that we see is this white truck in the distance, which is actually an oil tanker in the game. So I bent the rules of realism a little bit and parked the tanker sideways directly in the turret's line of sight, giving players something fun to shoot at and blow up for their visual pleasure. At last, we see the leader with the crown UI on the top. The commander usually has higher health points, and as you can see, he's a bit difficult to kill as well.
Kill the fuckers! Booyah! Got your back!
Finally, after killing the leader, all that we need to finish the mission is to clear out the remaining cultists.